I am unspoiled this week, and for that I am thankful, because hoo boy, this chapter went from great to insane in a matter of one double page spread. Yes, we'll get into it, and who knows at this point how much I have to say about it, but I'm guessing it'll be quite a lot. Let's start by taking this chapter one event at a time, working up to that phenomenal ending. The chapter title is The Harley, which based on its mention in an earlier chapter, we can guess that this chapter will give us something related to the Holy Book of Elbaf. We get another installment of Yamato's cover story, and I at least appreciate the pace at which we are getting new entries, as sometimes there can be frequent pauses in the cover stories due to colour spreads. Loki presumes that Shamrock is related to Shanks, given that they look alike. Gunko scolds Loki for prying, but after Loki talks of his natural curiosity, Shamrock explains that Shanks is his younger twin, and drops a line about Shanks having returned to Marijwa once, and now this continues to muddy the speculation fans have had. After all, the existence of Shamrock called into question the scene where somebody spoke with the Five Elders about a certain pirate. Certain key details were obscured so that we could not tell definitively if this person was Shanks or not, and now knowing that Shanks did go to Marijwa at some point, the question is now, and still, was that Shanks, and which pirate did he want to talk about? Could go on about this one little line, but I think it's more interesting how this reveal is punctuated by characterization of Shamrock as your typical celestial dragon, lamenting how Shanks prefers the filth of the lower world. Of course, Loki continues to be a very angry boy, talking about his wrath and how Shamrock will rue this day. Look, I'm sure Loki is very strong and powerful, but he's been talking himself up so much, it's starting to feel like he's some level of deluded. Of course, I still want to get a glimpse of his real character at some point soon. By that I mean, I don't believe that this is all there is to him. In any case, Shamrock is not impressed by Loki's threats, and his sword turns into a Cerberus. Man, all those Blackbeard has the Cerberus fruit theories, and it turns out a celestial dragon's sword has the fruit. Not trying to poke fun at the theories or theorists, just saying that it's kind of funny how often the series can throw us, the fan base, for a loop. Hoping we see more of this three-headed dog sword in the future, because this current showing, well, let's talk about it. The dog sword at the moment is simply used as something to fight a defenseless Loki, as Shamrock and Gunko are off to somewhere unconfirmed. Shamrock seems open to Loki making good on his threats, which likely shows his confidence in his ability to defend himself. In the meantime, all Loki can do is curse the celestial dragon for attacking him, while he has no recourse but to take it. Shamrock notes that pacifying the giants of Elbaf will be a difficult task, and thinks that getting to the children will be the first step. That's really nasty work, but not surprising coming from a celestial dragon. We cut to the Straw Hats listening to the giants tell them who attacked, and they assume it was Redhair. They say that they would recognize him anywhere, but all I can think is, really, you're so sure it was him because you would recognize him anywhere. But you couldn't tell the difference between a man with 2 arms and a man with 1 arm? How do you think Shanks just grew an extra arm and then developed an entirely different personality? You know what? No, I'm not doing this. It's not important. Of course the giants suspect Shanks. It's what the plot demands. We know how these stories work. Thankfully, Luffy is here talking some sense into the giants. Wait, what? Luffy is the one talking sense into people? We're doomed, aren't we? Anyway, the conversation leads to the assumption that maybe Shanks has a brother, and also the dismissal of Buggy by Luffy, a recurring gag at this point that feels like Luffy is just coping since he doesn't respect Buggy. But as they are talking about the Roger Pirates, the man in the striped robe and big Wano-style hat is outside the castle, likely headed their way. We then cut to Frankie at the Atom Tree, who we haven't seen in a couple chapters, so this was somewhat expected. He talks to Ripley about the Atom Tree wood and its value, and how Saul had scolded him for trying to take some of it earlier. He then happens upon an ancient mural, said to be drawn by children who lived in the Void Century. Now, the cutaway to Robin initially gives the impression that we won't see this mural, but we do. We'll get to it, don't worry, but we are being careful here not to miss anything else that we want to talk about. Speaking of, the revelation that this mural is related to the Void Century immediately has Frankie think that Robin ought to see it. Anyway, as Frankie and Ripley speculate on why there are so many different races depicted in the mural, we do get small glimpses of it, what appear to be a mermaid, a robot, and a mink. Ripley thinks of it as a child's dream, but for reasons that will become clear as we get into it, I think it goes way beyond that. So we cut to Robin and Chopper in the Owl Library, about to read the Harley, and they get permission from Saul to read it, as he eagerly shares what little he knows. Of course, Robin reading the Harley was a pretty safe prediction, but to actually see it is super satisfying. Though not nearly as satisfying as the final double-page spread of this chapter. This thing, I gotta break it all down as best I can, but what we have here is the lore of the century. Before, during, and after the Void Century, that is. So let's first break down the text before diving into the mural, because all of it together deserves analysis, and these pages alone elevate the chapter from an enjoyable, transitionary chapter with some cool moments, to possibly one of the greatest chapters of One Piece so far. So, let's start off reading the whole thing, because it's nuts, and it's probably best to get the full context before we dive in, as these words need to be heard to be believed. The first world. Within the earth there was fire. Mankind succumbed to greed and touched the forbidden sun. The enslaved prayed, and the sun god appeared. The earth god raged, and with its serpent of hellfire shrouded the world in death and darkness. And they will never meet. The second world. Within the void there was breath. The forest god tamed demons, and the sun spread the fires of war. Those of the half-moon dreamed, those of the moon dreamed. Man killed the sun and became god, and the sea gods stormed, and they will never meet. The third world. Within the chaos there was emptiness. The inconvenient remnants recalled the promised day, and hear the voice of the half-moon. The sun god dances and laughs, guiding the world to its end. The sun returns and brings a new morning, and they will surely meet. This lore is unmatchable. Like we've had lore drops before, but this feels like something on the level of Chapter 234, please remember. The first time that the world of One Piece truly expanded and is still among the most memorable world-building chapters. And again, this is only one double-page spread that elevates this chapter to such a high level. But enough hyping it up. You're excited, I'm excited. We need to analyze what's being said here and try to wrap our thick, meaty heads around it. I'm getting distracted because I'm hungry. I'm starting to sound like Luffy, and that is not good when right now we want to be channeling Robin. So firstly, the first world. Within the earth there was fire. There is mention of an earth god later in this section, so are we talking about the earth or the earth god? There could be purpose in the distinction, or it could be vague and misleading on purpose. Right now my gut tells me that it might be the actual earth. We will go with the distinction conclusion. So what does it mean that within the earth there was fire? Well, the earth has a core, but that is deep underground. Maybe if the fire refers to energy, then are we talking about coal? Hear me out, because this next line is key here. Mankind succumbed to greed and touched the forbidden sun. So my thinking here is that man discovered coal and created energy, and to build off of this, the enslaved prayed and the sun god appeared. The mining of coal in this era perhaps involved slavery, and perhaps the sun god of this time was the liberator of these people. It is curious, though, that the next line speaks of an earth god, a serpent of hellfire, and the world being shrouded in death and darkness. So what we can gather is that the sun god played no part in whatever great change occurred in this time. But what could this event be as described? Well, whatever it was, the death and darkness are important factors to consider and come back to. The first passage ends with, "and they will never meet," a foreboding and tragic way to end a story, but one that somewhat illuminates the events that transpired. See, in this instance, I believe it refers to the sun god and earth god being unable to meet, that the earth god's rage had an unintended side effect that ended in tragedy. What is curious about the pre-Void Century time period is that while we don't know a lot about it, it is spoken of as if it has not been erased like the Void Century. And yet surely if the world was so different before the Void Century, would that history not also draw more attention to the Void Century's existence? Like if people know what happened before the Void Century and what happened after, wouldn't the vast difference in the landscape of the world be some sort of clue as to why the Void Century was covered up in the first place? This is the thing about the Void Century that I've always sort of wondered. But now that we are starting to get a bigger picture of the world's history, it comes to the forefront of my mind once again. Musings on pre-Void Century history aside, let's try to analyze the second world now. Within the void there was breath. This line clues us into when the Harley was written, as it would be odd to refer to the void, presumably the Void Century, before it had come to be known that way. So the Harley was written after the Void Century as a summary of the past and a prophecy for the future. When the text talks of breath, they mean life, as in people were alive and things happened during this period of time. The forest god tamed demons and the sun spread the fires of war. Here we get a mention of a forest god, demons, and the fires of war. So I believe that the sun in this instance is a shorthand for the sun god. Now I have little basis for thinking this. I am taking a stab in the dark at the forest god taming demons and theorizing that this is a hint at the origins of devil fruits, which early on in the series were said to come from trees. As to the sun spreading the fires of war, this is where perhaps the sun god of this era, Joy Boy, was waging war against the world, perhaps for some reason related to the current state of the world that had been true since the events of the first world. We are then told that those of the half moon and those of the moon dreamed, and to a lot of us who have been aware of community theories and the Eneru cover story for some time, these seem to reference the family of D and the Birkins respectively. Man killed the sun and became God, and the sea god stormed. This feels like an obvious nod to the events of the Void Century, where the world government was formed after fighting Joy Boy, and then the sea levels rose by 200 meters. My guess is that the sea god refers to the Poseidon of the time, as once again the passage is punctuated by, and they will never meet, and I believe this is referring to another tragedy, this time involving the known figures of Joy Boy and Poseidon. So there is a lot here to speculate on regarding the Void Century, but we need to keep moving because we aren't just getting a history lesson here, folks, we're getting a prophecy, so buckle up. The third world, within the chaos there was emptiness. This is an ominous line to start off the prophecy, but what chaos specifically are they talking about? A safe bet might be the Great Pirate Era, which is rather profound, to say that there is emptiness within a time where many people are searching in vain for a legendary treasure. The inconvenient remnants recall the promised day and hear the voice of the half moon. This is a confirmation of an awaited resolution to the tragedies of the past. Those who have suffered due to the course of history, the various races and people who have been discarded, they look to the family of D for hope, and that is where they will find it. The sun god dances and laughs, guiding the world to its end. Luffy will dance and laugh for sure, but how would he feel about fulfilling a prophecy? He's Luffy, not the sun god. He's not a hero, he eats all the meat. He's king of the pirates, not someone important. The sun returns and brings a new morning, and they will surely meet. Now the tragedy has been reversed, hope taking its place. The sun god returns and brings a new dawn. This is what many throughout the series, particularly in the later half of the story, have been alluding to. And so who exactly will meet? Well, based on the nature of the previous tragedies, I am guessing that it means that Luffy will meet all the people who need the sun god to help them see the light again. This is a series of 3 passages that tells us so much about the history of the world while still being super cryptic. Even my analysis could be way off. And now the reasoning of the text having multiple interpretations starts to make sense. But beyond the text, the imagery of the mural brings even more to this spread to talk about and speculate over. Firstly, we see what seems to be a depiction of the first world. And based on what I'm seeing, I'm wondering if my theory held some weight. We have what looks like a factory city, with people coming out and going underground, coming back up carrying suns and feeding them to the city. Looming above the city, a fire-breathing serpent. In the middle is a massive tree, and between the tree and the depiction of the first world there is a large boat, and a few different animals, 2 of each waiting to board. This appears to be some acknowledgement of Noah, the ship of promise, from the seafloor of Fishman Island. In this area is also a single person with wings, and a crowned silhouette in a boat on a path to another boat. It's very hard for me to tell what exactly I'm looking at in this instance and what it means. Above the tree appears to be another monster, also capable of breathing fire, its flames blending into the serpent's flames. But then what are we looking at in the entire right half? It appears to be a gigantic war between the sun god and his allies, and a monster trying to steal the sun. But is this a battle that already took place, or a battle that will take place? Is it both? Will the outcome be different this time? To be clear, we see fighting with the sun god what appear to be a Lunarian, 2 people riding on a giant whale, a robot that resembles Emmett, people from Joy Boy's nation, people from Wano, an ancient giant, a mermaid princess, a Tontada, 2 minks, a giant, a long-armed tribe, other people with no discernible features, and an actual fish thrown in for good measure. This mural and the accompanying passages of text are perhaps the densest lore drops we have seen yet, and it still feels like what we got was just the teaser trailer. I am feeling more invested in One Piece than ever, and yet I have a strong feeling that the full story will not be told just yet, that we are going to have to wait a bit before we get confirmation on what all of this means. So, I've broken down this chapter, and in particular the last page, as best I can. Said a lot about this chapter. I think we can safely categorize it as one of the greatest chapters of all time by the last page alone, so I've got to know, what do you think of this chapter? Tell me in the comments, and I'll do the lyric thing in this video too, but it's much less important than the chapter itself. So yeah, if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. Let me know the source of these song lyrics. A new day will dawn for those who stand long, and the forests will echo with laughter.